One and all. Thanks for joining us in this episode of webinar on AIOps. I'm pretty happy that you had taken time today to be with us on a Friday. For some people, it is Friday morning. For some people, it is Friday evening. Thanks for taking that time about understanding about AIOps. So this is our monthly webinars that we host as part of TaUB Solutions. I'm very happy to be here today on the Friday evening, and thanks to my team at TaUB Solutions who wanted this AIOps webinar to be arranged. So we are here. So we'll get this kicked off. So today we are going to talk about AI in operations. So when we say AI in operations, we are looking at um, some of this key agenda that we want to um, talk about today as part of the um, webinar is for a lot of people, this is new, right? A lot of people have heard about AI. AI is the big thing, and everybody starts to get excited about it. But let's understand what is AIOps, what is the introduction to AIOps. We'll talk a little bit about the principles and practices around AIOps. We'll also talk about some of those practical implementation strategies because a lot of our clients that we are working globally wants to know about how AIOps can change their ways of working. So we are primarily focused on helping those with some practical implementation strategies. We're going to talk about that strategies. We'll also talk a little bit about the case studies and best practices that has been available and some of those experiences that we have done with our clients when we are implementing on site reliability engineering, IT service management, IT operations. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And also, a lot of people have asked, how do I equip myself in a career journey on AIOps? So we have an upcoming workshop on 28th and 29th of September. We are going to do AIOps Foundation course. I'm going to be hosting that sessions. I don't do a lot of these AIOps sessions, but this is something important for this month. So I'm doing personally delivering this workshop on AIOps. I hope you can take advantage of this certification, and then we'll have a lot of time for Q&A. So if you've just joined today as part of these workshop, please post on the chat window from where you are dialing in. I see Manikandan, Sheetal, Sumukh, Anuradha, Alberto, Manikandan, Parasuram is joining in from Atlanta. Rajarshi, nice to see you. Santosh, Shyam, again, joining us from Texas. So a lot of people, some familiar faces, some new faces. Please welcome everyone for this particular webinar. So please post your, on the chat from where you're dialing in. So this is the quick agenda that we would like to run in the next 1 hour on a Friday. And I want to make sure that you have plenty of takeaways for this session that you can go ahead. And if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to take it as we come over, right? So that's the agenda for today. We start with a little bit of background about myself and our company. So I'm the managing director and founder of TaUB Solutions. In fact, co-founder of TaUB Solutions along with Satya, who's the co-founder as well Chief Operating Officer. I'm the global ambassador of the DevOps Institute. I'm a regional leader. I've been, we've been running TaUB Solutions as part of 10th year. If you looked at our LinkedIn post today, we will be completing our 10 years on November 1. We are really looking forward to making an impact. So overall, 23 plus years in the industry, started in service management, looked at IT governance, organizational change management, business relationship management. And in the last 8 to 9 years, I've been focused heavily on agile DevOps, site reliability engineering at large. I also speak in a lot of international conferences on thought leadership on service management. Now, as we speak, I'm going to be in ITSMF Zurich next month to speak at the ITSMF Zurich conference. I was also last month in ITSMF Australia. So service management has been in bread and butter. A lot of people here come from service management backgrounds. So this is going to be very useful for people who are looking at what's the next wave in service management because we moved from ITIL version 2. I come from the ITIL version 2 days We've done version 3, version 4 now. What's changing? How is AIOps going to help you both as an organization as well as an individual to ramp up things, right? I was awarded the ITSM of Singapore Contributor of the Year for ITSM of Singapore in 2013. I'm also one of the HDI's top 25 influencers in service management for 3 consecutive years and a recipient of 4 Excellence Awards at Washington, D.C. So that's a little bit about background. I'm very passionate about site reliability engineering, observability, and AIOps because I managed infrastructure for about 10 years as part of HP. And every time the client used to ask, what's the guarantee that you will reduce the incidents? Because we don't want to have ticket resolutions. Can we go moving forward? So the premise that I want you to think about when it comes to AIOps is how do you move from reactive to proactive to predictive, right? So reactive was your incident management that we are all familiarized with workarounds. Now we moved into proactive in terms of event monitoring, event correlation, some level of problem management to identify root cause analysis. But the next wave that we are seeing is towards predictiveness, right? How do we make sure that our ability to make things predictable, making sure that we are able to predict incidents from happening and prevent it from happening again is the biggest part of the equation. So I hope that in the next 55 minutes, I'm going to share you some real world experiences and practices of how AIOps is changing the world because, people seem to be caught up on AI, right? Everybody who I talk about talks about AI, machine learning and stuff. But the reality is that you need to know how are you going to use it for your own workplace, right? So that's going to be important. So adapting and adopting to what is there out there and how your organization is looking at implementing is going to be critical. So that's a little bit about background. As I said, a quick recap on what you're going to cover. We're going to talk about AIOps. We're going to talk about AIOps principles and practices, practical implementation strategies, some case studies, and also about our upcoming certification workshop. So for people who've just joined, please put on the chat window from where you're dialing in and your awareness on the AIOps. Are you a beginner? Are you an intermediate or an expert? So we know from which background you come from, so we can actually help you to navigate this webinar more meaningfully. Again, I on behalf of TaUB Solutions, are very grateful that you took the time on a Friday evening, Friday morning, afternoon, whatever time be, to be with us. And I hope that we will give you some excellent value in the next an hour or so to do it. Right? So let's talk about introducing AIOps. And I think, as you know, Gartner named it as AIOps. I think it's somewhere around 2016. This term was coined by Gartner. As you know, Gartner is one of the analyst firm that focuses a lot more on the new trends. We call this as Gartner's hype curve, and things move a lot more rapidly on the side. So let's start with the premise, right? Why AIOps, right? Let's start on understanding the big picture view. So today, every organization after COVID is a digital enterprise, right? We are looking at a lot of these stuff around application availability, system availability, making sure that the systems are reliable and resilient, right? So that's why site reliability engineering focuses on availability, focus on reliability and resilience aspect of it, right? So reliability comes in different formats. When we talk about reliability, the ability of a system or an application to perform its desired function without undergoing failure, right? So it's a focus on making sure that you don't fail. And in spite of all your plans, all your things in place, things fail. So how do you recover back quickly, right? So do you go to the level of getting into auto remediation? That's also an area that we see things possible. A couple of housekeeping rules to keep your things on mute. We will give you an option for asking Q&A later, but for the benefit, I want you to make sure that you're in an environment to mute yourself so that we can make sure that everybody is able to listen and see to this whole presentation. In terms of what's different, so today we have moved from Agile to DevOps to DevSecOps to cloud, mobility. A lot of things are interconnected. So in fact, we are today talking about a multi-cloud environment, right? It could be on Azure, AWS, GCP, in fact, a combination of both. So a lot of our clients that we look at are already into multi-cloud environment. So the ability to host things are getting better, but the reliability and resilience becomes a lot more problem. So the impact of interconnected devices and stuff is about bad user experience, right? My system is not available. I'm not able to perform an operation, which impacts your top line and bottom line. And more importantly, the brand image, like be it WhatsApp, be it Facebook, any of those products has got a big hit on the brand reputation, right? So what we are expecting and what are companies expecting to achieve is to identify how can we be more proactive and detect the issues much faster, right? We typically talk about MTTD, mean time to detect. And this mean time to detect just tells you that we have a lot more going on in the aspect, and that particular part is ability to prevent it before it happens. So that's the world that we are focusing in, right? Providing root cause analysis. We did this as part of problem management. We did something like a trend analysis and proactive problem management. But I think the world is really going into auto remediation. An example could be if an Exchange server goes down, how can it automatically create a ticket in ServiceNow? Because I would presume all of you have experience of your ITSM tool called ServiceNow, and it should remediate it because there is a script that is automatically running and auto remediate it. So that's the real world of how organizations are embarking on this whole journey. And I hope that this will be helpful for us to do that. So hopefully this sets you the context on the digital first enterprise, what's different, what's impacting the challenges, and why we are talking about AIOps. So for getting the framework or understanding about what is AIOps, this graphic from Gartner is super important, right? A lot of people here would have come from IT service management background. So typically we have looked at incident problem changes, and that's been the biggest one, right? Though we are talking about a lot of other practices, as we call it as ITIL 4, the primary objective is about service management, is about looking at incidents problem changes. Now, a lot of these tasks that we do, like for example, change tasks, rolling out into production, breaking down a major change into, breaking down into parts, could be a part of change tasks as well. Knowledge management, right? Typically, we have looked at knowledge articles, we have looked at elements to leverage the knowledge base and resolve incidents. Now, I think the world is changing, right? We are looking at chatbots. Today, for a customer of us, we have replaced 25% of incident tickets using chatbot, right? And there is other elements where we are looking at options where we are building in scripts and runbooks, right? Runbook automation, so that we know there's repeated issues happening around how we can make that resolved. So that's the act part of it. And observe is where we talk about observability. Now, monitoring is what we call as, you do your infrastructure monitoring, you do your application monitoring. Those things are bringing in an element of symptoms. What is broken, right? Your CPU, memory utilization and stuff like that. But beyond that, what observability talks about is root cause, right? A lot of times we call about unknown unknowns. So how do you find unknown unknowns, right? In spite of all your monitoring, and in fact, if you all your sophisticated APM tools, application performance monitoring tools, we will still find something breaking into production, which we call as wisdom of production. So how do you assimilate what are the problems, what are the scenarios that we need to get in place? And that's the part of observability, right? So as part of observability, we talk about metrics, events, logs, and traces. So you would have heard about microservices. So if you are looking at microservices, there is an element of distributed tracing. So we know exactly what is the highest performing query, and I got a use case for that, and we will be able to fix it then and there. So at the center of this AIOps is that we have machine learning and big data, right? So machine learning and big data is going to help you to facilitate this overall AIOps engine. So the machine learning looks at all the data, consumes it, and then provides you a pattern to do it. And AIOps makes the inference of how we can make this doable. So there's a lot more on big data. As you know, big data is something where people are looking at unstructured data. Like a lot of these informations are available on text messages and stuff. How do we assimilate the data to do it? Today, I think we have a lot more data, right? And how do you get a meaningful representation of data? That's where I think AIOps makes it a lot more impactful. So hopefully this big picture gives you an idea about how AIOps is structured and how much is it related towards engage, right? So in the IT service management world, we are talking about the entire value stream about engage, right? So engaging with your customers and users and whatnot, right? So as you start to do this analysis, you try to look at anomaly detection, you're looking at performance analysis, you're looking at correlation. There's a lot of things happening around observability. If you know site reliability engineering, one of the key aspects is about moving into from monitoring to observability. And for observability to work in real action is where AIOps will make it. So in fact, we have workshops on SRE Foundation, SRE Practitioner, Observability Foundation, and AIOps. So that's a logical step of people moving into that particular chain. So if I try to break it down into a graphical approach, AIOps is the recognition that in our new accelerated hyperscale digital environment, there must be a new approach that leverages big data and machine learning to overcome legacies, siloed tools, and human limitations. So we all know that with Chat GPT and generative AI, there is so much that we can get it done. Now, it's also about looking at specific for IT operational issues, right? So our focus here is only predominantly on operation side of things. We are not looking at generative AI. We are not going to look at other trends of AI because that's not the scope of this discussion. This is for people who are day in and day out looking at service management, IT operations. How do they better their performance? So that's the kind of the dimension. So if you look at it, a lot of organizations have got application performance monitoring tools. They have network performance monitoring tools, their infrastructure monitoring tools, and overall, they have their command center and digital experience monitoring. Today, a lot of our clients are talking about digital experience monitoring. They are not talking about isolated in terms of infrastructure and applications because they all boil down to one single use case of how we can make that work. So as we start to see this through, we need to understand there are domain algorithms, rules and patterns. So the baseline is your data source, right? It could be from your log files, your metrics, your tickets, your monitoring aspects. So all of those events, your aggregation of events, monitoring, that will be your data source, right? That's where the starting point of moving up the value chain. You process the data and people build something called as like a data lake, right? Data lake, which is like making a part of a single source of truth. Because with that, then you process the information with machine learning AI and finally see what action you can take about it. So in essence, you try to use and leverage all the data that you have in place to get a lot more benefits moving forward in that direction, right? So what does it mean for us in terms of service management? Typically, we had knowledge base that we started off. How can we improve an ability to triage the incidents and remediate the problems, right? So problems, as you know, is focusing on root cause analysis beyond just the temporary fixes. So think about as you start looking at your knowledge base, as you look at your known error database, as you look at your problem records, you try to match your problem category with different aspects. And it starts to suggest solutions, right? And that's the big part of it. We don't need to figure it out, going to knowledge articles, finding out the solution, and then say, okay, this is the solution, I do it. It will process all your information because all your data is available in your ServiceNow instance. So this AI engine will probably assimilate all this data from different sources. In fact, with all the hooks and APIs that you make, and then suggest solutions of probability. And then based on that, you can create your script, a playbook that will be able to make it work. So I think the whole importance in site reliability engineering perspective is reduce toil. Toil is like you waste a lot of time in back and forth doing here. You should be become smarter, right? And I think we should focus on more important activities rather than doing everything for us. If you look at L1, L2, and stuff like that. So what does the maturity model look like? As I said, the first one is reactive. We all do about incident management. We have their alerts, you have metrics, you have traditional IT operations. I still see people having L1, L2, L3 support, focusing on ticket resolution, response time, resolution time. Then we looked at proactiveness, which is more about having a platform, right? We have a dashboard to look at your trend analysis, right? How much is the repetitive incidents and what might be the reasons why it is happening like that? And then finally, kind of looking at how we can do a little bit proactiveness, right? So that's the part that we did. And then we get into some level of predictiveness, right? So in order to do predictiveness, you cannot do it without AI ops platform or a machine learning model in place. And that's why if you look at the level 2 recommendations, you use your machine learning models, which will look at your prediction and correlation of things and put it in terms of actionable insights. So it could be your messaging queues, it could be of Kafka, it could be your teams that you are looking at, like Slack channels. What we have done is one of our implementation is that we have integrated with Slack, integrated with Teams, integrated with Kafka. So any kind of things automatically get pushes into the message queue. So you don't need to really run behind things. You will actually get intelligent decision making to do that. So that's the world that I think most of the people are already in, which I think in most of the companies that I work and see, they are in this particular space of building that predictiveness. But the world that is still not fully automated is where you look at your machine learning model, you look at feeding that into AIOps, and then bringing in the auto remediation playbooks and runbooks in a manner that it will solve it by itself. So the next time something happens, you should not be even notified. That's the power in which we are doing it, right? We have been doing service management for a whole lot of time, right? And this is one of my conversation in ITSM of Zurich in October. I'm talking about how AIOps is going to change the way we do service management. At least from an IT operation standpoint, it's going to change the whole dimensions of how we see this through overall. If you have any questions, put it on the chat and I will pick it up at the things. And I just want to take a pause here. Does it make sense? Any questions so far on this particular slide, so far what we've discussed? Yeah. Thanks,
Yes,
Anand.
yes,
So,
it does.
yeah, go
Yes,
ahead.
it does. I say yes, it does. It seems.
Okay. So some of the use cases that we have heard popularly is about how can we do proactive intelligent alerts? How can we do event correlation? How much we can do predictiveness, right? So these are typical use cases in which AIOps is being positioned on, right? And it's very important when you are doing implementation of AIOps, which is the specific use case that makes the most sense for you, right? Just because you have a laundry list of use cases, do not go by what people say. It has to be very adaptive towards what is relevant for you and pick the use cases that makes the most sense and then start with that small, right? So let's talk a little bit about trends in the industry because as I go and speak in a lot of these international conferences and thought leadership, I continuously solicit more reports, trends on what's happening around because we should not be left in the dark, right? So the whole world is moving from reactive to proactive to automating to prediction. That's where we are heading to. That's the whole journey. If you call it as a Gartner's hype curve, we are aiming at being to be at that level of prediction. We are somewhere between proactive and automate. To be honest, with all the implementation that I've seen in about 15 different geographies that I work with, they are only at about proactive to automate. We have not even fully automated at this section. But I would be happy to check in your organization as you start going through this journey. Where do you think you are in this journey? Are you in reactive, proactive, automate, or prediction? I'll be happy to look at your scenario. Where do you belong to? What kind of areas that you think is your organization in the maturity curve? If I put it in that way, reactive, proactive to automate or prediction, right? So put that on the chat window. So when the report was, and this was a AIOps report that was done a year back and relevant to 2024, 69% of the people talked about using AIOps for intelligent alerting, right? Alerting was the most important part. The second most important reason that people used was for event correlation. This is very much identifiable because you are getting events from all different corners, right? Proprietary tools, open source tools, API calls. It's such a mess, right? So much aggregate to do it. And sometimes it's noise, you know. A lot of people I talk with, they say there's a lot of false positive alerts that makes them feel that they don't have that option to move it in that direction. And then there's a lot more on threat detection because a lot more on privacy issues, intrusions happening around capacity and incident auto remediation. The other aspect that we saw was how the team, so this is what we talked about, and what are the primary benefits? If they looked at AIOps tools, and I have one slide to talk about how do you choose your tools, automation of tedious tasks. This is what we talk about toil in site reliability engineering. 85% people want to look at automating tedious tasks, right? Deduplication of alerts. We talked about false positives, right? It is such a time waste about false positive alerts. So how do you suppress or correlate your alerts? It's about 80%. And 77% of the people tell about how can I reduce my open incident tickets, right? So that's the trend in which people are starting to use those AI tools part of it. And when we talked about what kind of challenges that they have when they use AIOps tools, they said 67% of the people talked about data accuracy, right? It's garbage in, garbage out. If you don't do a good aspect of looking at your data, right? Your cumulative data that comes from all different parts of different sources, this is not going to help you at all. That 67% say that data accuracy is a problem. The second was very interesting. And that's why I think we did this webinar, because we want to educate the people. 64% of the people say there is a skill gap. They want someone to be a data scientist. They want to know about machine learning. They are struggling. They are not able to get resources on that part, and so on and so forth, right? So I hope this gives you a little bit of a trend on how this is probably making you feel what organizations are seeing this through to Element. Thanks, Millie. Millie says proactive and some automate as part of their journey. But yeah, it's a journey, right? It's a marathon. You don't get it right away, but it takes time to move in that direction, right? And there's another question is how long did it take to implement AIOps solution? And 40% of the people say that took about 3 months to 6 months of an effort to make this work. Now, 3 to 6 months is a reasonable amount of time to give you proof of value, right? We don't call it as pilot, we call it as proof of value, because it has to give you a real purpose that it works and do it. And this is another part that I see, that sometimes when they do the pilot, it all works well, but they look at they go beyond the pilot, it doesn't work. So trying to understand how do we help to assimilate the information, get value, get the momentum, and then move forward on that direction is something possible, right? So 40 to 65%, like 65% of the people are looking at from 3 months, 6 months, and 25% to 6 months, right? So I think that makes it sense that it's not a cookie cutter solution, right? Don't think about, oh, we started implementing AIOps and it all changed. It's not a magic wand, right? You need to kind of look at opportunities to adapt and adopt and see how we can make this move forward to do it. Anil Singh tells 3 months minimum for AIOps from COP to production. Absolutely right, Anil. Now, the point is that we need to also pick up the right use cases. A part of the problem that I see is people try to overdo this one, right? They look at all different use cases. Do not do that. When you pick your proof of value or the pilot, focus on one use case that is the most important one and then do it. But thanks for sharing that, Anil. It is taking a lot of time to move that. And it's a journey. So please make sure that you have the right skill set, resources, and also have the right expectation with the leadership team. And this is another interesting question was asked, how long does it take to hire machine learning, artificial intelligence engineers? 53% of the people said that 6 to 12 months. It's a huge queue, right? And a lot of people now are doing data science, data learning, machine learning and other stuff, but be very clear. You should need to know some of those understanding on service management, IT operations. You need to understand your domain knowledge, because without that, your data science or data intelligence will not be of any use, right? So please do not have this part that technology is going to solve the problem. A lot of these insights come from your real world experience, working about 15 years, 20 years, 25 years in the industry. And that's how you start connecting the dots. So do not underestimate the level of experience that you have in service management. Cannot be a replacement for new technologies, right? So any questions from what we can take this time to take some questions if you have, because I want to make sure that it's value for you and you're able to relate to what we are doing on the ground, right? So any questions from anybody from on the slide so far that we've discussed?
Suresh?
Yeah, go ahead, Shyam.
Yeah. So typically AIOps, right? That connotation is more towards infrastructure is what people typically think. but it
Right.
actually cuts across applications and infrastructure. So
Correct.
what does it take to dispel that myth? That is one thing.
Correct.
Second thing is there used to be products like MoveSoft and stuff like that, right?
Correct.
I know that you're going to be talking about it, but I am thinking that AIOps is coming at the juncture of both your monitoring observability tools plus service management, right? So
Correct.
there is some
Correct.
kind of integration between these two.
Correct.
That is where some value of AIOps comes into picture.
Correct.
And I have few more comments. I will keep it for now and I'll come back
Sure.
later.
Great question, Shyam. Now, first of all, I think you're right. The perception is AOps is more towards infrastructure. I'm going to give some use cases. It is not just about infrastructure, but it also has to be an application side. So think about the entire value chain to look at what is the problem that we are trying to solve, right? And if you look at just infrastructure aspect of it, it's just short-sighted, right? I'm not saying it doesn't solve the problem, but from an organization standpoint, from an industry standpoint, you need to look at the end-to-end or holistic value chain where we need to start seeing the value of how we can be brought into that whole aspect of it. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And also about tools, right? Every tool today is promising. ServiceNow, MoveSoft, whatever it is that's being doing that. So we'll also talk a little bit about how to pick and choose some tools. And Anuradha is also alluding to the part, what specific tools are we going to talking about? Are we able to achieve this outcome? Like, for example, Anuradha, ServiceNow itself has promised some level of AI in place, right? And they don't want, and as you know, while ServiceNow started off as an ITSM tool, it has gone beyond, right? It's doing on Agile, it's doing on DevOps, it's doing on portfolio management. So there is going to be, every tool is going to bring in an AI engine, machine learning algorithm inbuilt to it, right? And it's about people are going to say that we all have things. And for me, what is interesting is as I talk to a lot of companies are trying to build AI, machine learning, large language models by themselves because they are worried about ethics. A big part of AI is AI in ethics, right? What happens if your data is consumed by someone else, right? It's on the cloud. What happens? What's the kind of certainty that this will happen is also an important area to do it. Go ahead, Shyam. You had some comment or things to.
Yeah, so just a related thing, right?
Yeah,
A few days ago, there was this Salesforce conference,
correct,
Dreamforce. Now
correct.
they have a product called Agent Force,
Hmm.
where they are talking about agents in the customer relationship management space. Again, Salesforce is a CRM company.
Right.
So they are talking about these agents acting as customer service representatives who will not get angry, who will talk in the most sophisticated language. They have the most deep knowledge about customer requirements and what's happening in the background. So that's what Mark Benioff is talking about in terms of what kind of revolution is.
Yeah, it is actually scary, Shyam, to be honest. How much are we going to be relevant if everything is going to be, maybe we thought relationship and those level of humanism, emotional aspects, all of those stuff we thought we would beat AI, but AI is trying to pick up quickly, right? And we'll have to see. It's how we kind of perform on that part. But yeah, very interesting conversations on those aspects that we have to wait and watch. Now let's shift gears around practical implementation strategies. So I want to give a use case. And this is a very typical use case that many organizations struggle with. So what we have is, typically in a world where you used to have, performance tuning was one of the areas that we always used to about. What is the longest performing query, right? What is a query which is taking the longest time? That used to be the part, right? So in a traditional world, we used to have database having long running queries, be it your SQL Server or Oracle. Long running queries results in database calls, which takes more time, which means most of the times there is a connection timeout, right, from the application database level. So this is one area of time talking about an application level, right? So user transactions are failing and technical decline. So there is something called as technical decline, and the other one is called business decline. So business decline is basically you don't have money in the bank account, right? We are looking at a consumer banking kind of scenario, right? So a programmable alert is triggered. Now what will happen is, with all these said and done, there has to be a level of auto remediation playbook, which is being created because the suspects, right? Based on historical evidences, what are the things that will go wrong. and gives you an opportunity for us to say, okay, you know what? I will probably build a playbook on this one that will help me to assess how we can make this more meaningful. And then as you start to move in this journey, you start seeing that it automatically resolves, remediates it, and the DB operations are coming back to normal and the user transactions are processed. Now, if you look at it, there is something called as lead indicators, and I've listed down that your volume of tickets, your failures, and turnaround time, right? Typically, you get it from every application that has been processed, right? These are things. And then we talk about golden signals. If you look at golden signals, we talk about latency, we talk about utilization, we talk about error rates, and so on and so forth. But we kind of look at it beyond just the part at every level, right? So we, in the whole value chain, we look at the app server level, web server level, load balancer level, database level, network level. You need to look at all of those stuff. In fact, we're looking at more of the aspects in terms of percentile rather than just absolute value, and then start using programmable alerts. So the question would be, if I ask you, what percentage of incidents is reoccurring? If I ask you, in your organization, with all said and done, what percentage of incidents are new incidents? That means an incident you've never seen before. Put it on the chat window. I would like to hear about it. What percentage of incidents are repeat incidents? 75%, 50%? What kind of things? I would like to hear about that, because it will tell you about what are you doing if that is part of the percentage that we talk about. 60%, Abu says 60%, and 50% for Anil, and so on. So which means almost 50% have to be going into a mode of auto remediation, right? Because you probably focus on new incidents that you've never seen that, rather than just spending a whole lot of time just resolving it, right? So if you look at the layers, and this is what I think you need to start thinking about, the AI is not at the infra layer, right? So if I look at the infra layer, you have your network line, your database, app server, web server. You go up there, right? So you have UPI payments, you have ACH, you have net banking. If you look at the overall the application layer part of it, then you go to business process, your payments, your balance inquiry, your KYC, know your customer, and then finally your user experience. So I think you need to start looking at this from an overall business perspective, because it's like the watermelon syndrome, right? Everything looks green outside from an SLA perspective, but then it is bleeding red when you just open it, because you're not measuring at the user experience level. And the user experience you can only do user experience when you are able to get collective wisdom. That's why we're talking about all your alerts, notifications will still have to make sense towards getting you that user experience story. So we are looking at faster root cause analysis, reducing the alert, anomaly detection, capacity planning. So these are some of the use cases of what we need to do. So the picture here is to look at beyond just incident problem changes. Start looking at how does it impact the overall scheme of things, and then take an action appropriately towards that. So this is one use case. This is a demo that we almost do it in our practical case. This is part of IBMB is internet banking, mobile banking application. This is a part of how the user journey goes through. The green ones means that it is that's all up and running live. So anything it goes down, it will go into a yellow color. It will automatically remediate using a script, and then things start working around. So this is the level of visualization that you will have on everything that is going behind the scenes, right? On the back end part of it, and seeing and taking corrective action and stuff like that. So it's about not just keeping that green, right? Is it giving you that adequate level of performance, right? So do you have still latency? Do you have error codes? Do you have failures? So that has to be looked at it overall, and action taken around it. So there's millions of transactions going on in our financial institutions, right? So how do you be on top of things is a bigger question to ask. So that's where I think this whole concept of observability makes it much more important. We look at your application performance monitoring, whether your App Dynamics, your Dynatrace, your Datadog, you have any of these tools, it doesn't matter, right? But then you start to look at how do you bring in observability aspect of it, right? Something like called as unknown unknowns, and then start facilitating this using proactive prevention with beta pattern stuff, because you're accumulating all of your data source, going into a data engine, processing this information, and then making it work, right? So a lot of organizations, when we start thinking about implementing AIOps, there is huge problems, right? Lack of domain knowledge, organizational change management becomes a problem. It does not cover end-to-end, rigid process, expectation mismatch. CMDB, we call a single source of truth. Today, if you look at your configuration management database or configuration management system, can you say it's a single source of truth? There are so much dynamic changes happening around on a daily basis or a minute-by-minute basis. So if I ask you to do a business impact analysis for a change record, it is almost impossible, right? Because it is changing every day. Whatever you see is just a snapshot, right? So it becomes very difficult to build in a single source of truth. And that's also a part of the problem that I see how things make it work. Absolutely right, Anuradha, data security. In fact, we just underwent a course called data privacy and data protection officer. And it just tells about that it adds another dimension because today we get data, we do campaigns, we get the data, you don't know whether the data is used being for the right purposes, and can you kind of withdraw this whole thing? Because with GDPR, in India, we have released the Digital Privacy Data Protection Act 2023. This is equivalent to the GDPR that we had earlier. So there's a lot more happening around data security, data privacy. So if you're not, you cannot say ignorance is bliss. You'll be penalized because in data privacy, data protection acts is 250 crores is the cost, and in GDPR it's 4% of the total revenue. So it is huge. So this will put a part of it, and this is again going back to AI ethics in place. So now some of the case studies and best practices that I think we should think about doing it around is based on some of the things. I thought I will summarize something that you can take away from, right? So this is from a NASSCOM report where they look at a 5-step assessment process, look at the goal, identify which use case is more important. As I said, there are multiple use cases, anomaly detection, error codes, and things like that. You decide what needs to be done. How do you integrate your data lakes, right? Because that's going to be the data part of it, data protection part of it, and data source as part of single source of truth, and see how we can build insights, right? So I wanted to give you some thoughts. There are 5 types of assessment. Descriptive assessment, where you can use it for problem behaviors, looking at it over a period of time. Then we have diagnostic, which is typically looking at strength and weaknesses in a particular area. Predictiveness, this is where we're trying to predict, or based on the call volumes, based on the incident records, what is the likelihood of things to happen. Prescriptive, like prescriptive is basically telling you step by step what we need to do, right? ITIL as a framework is basically trying to talk about best practices. It doesn't tell you what to do, right? But if you look at ISO 27001 part 2, it is very prescriptive. It tells you what needs to be done in order to make this part done. And then how do you build in that level of automation? So you need to really assess your asset state in the data that you are building in, the platforms that you're having in, the tools you're having in, and then see it through, right? So let's talk about this. How do you perform in a very practical scenario, right? You have your IT stack, which is your application, your network, your database, your infrastructure. And then you have raw data, right? You generate millions of data, teradata, whatever you have, trillions of data that you have that is generated by the stack, like CPU utilization logs. Now you need to start thinking about, why do we need AIOps? What's your use case here? So what transformation or contextualization is needed in terms of persona or purpose, right? And then which persona are you talking about? Is it the IT director? Is it the CIO? Is it the operator? Is it an architect? And that's something we have to really, really know about it. Because if we don't do this exercise, and this is where a lot of people make it wrong, that you need to do a due diligence of why we need to do this at the first place. What does it look like? And as we start to see this, we say, okay, does it serve the purpose? Because if you're not very clear about the purpose, the clarity of the purpose, your AIOps is not going to work. It's not going to work magic. And this is where I think you should spend a lot of time. Look at which personas are we dealing with, right? Because value lies on the eye of the beholder. What is the data that is required from a IT leader is not the way that an architect expects on that. Then you start looking at your vendors. Because if you start with your vendor ecosystem or tools, it's going to be too primitive because you don't even know what you need. And sometimes your vendors are going to take you for a ride, right? I know a lot of people who get stuck because the vendors have a lock-in period and stuff like that. So be very careful, right? It's not just about the tool is going to work. I always tell that a fool with a tool is still a fool, right? If you don't understand the logic, the business logic, the purpose of why we are doing AI, it is not going to make any sense. So be very careful of how you leverage this data, process the information, and then get this achieved. Now, this is an interesting slide that I want to bring in because I want you to look at the entire depth of how this works, right? So if I break this into parts, you have an application layer. So you build your application observability, your security event observability, the one that we talk about data security, at an infrastructure, whether it could be on-prem, it could be on cloud. You look at your cloud observability, storage, data center, you have a historical data, right? You have a lot of data that is available on your ServiceNow and other things like metric events, logs, and traces. Use this to look at what are the services that you're looking at. Oh, I need to optimize the resources. How do I do predictive analysis? How do I do anomaly detection? How do I do auto scaling? How do I do visualization? How do you do RCA? These are the aspects or use cases that is going to be more meaningful for you. And then that should lead to either it's going to be for user experience or operation automation, right? I hope this is very clear because I found this to be a very interesting graphic from the report from NASSCOM that's saying that we need to start understanding this is how this whole AI will work. It cannot work automatically from top to bottom. You need to start correlating of how your application stack is curated, how your infrastructure layer is curated. How are we going to do the big data machine learning AI services? What use cases are we targeting? Are we going to look at user experience persona? Are you looking at AIOps persona in terms of actionable insights? Because if you don't do this, then I think you don't have a picture of how AI will work through it. I hope this is useful in terms of the end-to-end stack framework that I thought would be useful takeaway to do it. The other part is about data. I think we are talking about data pipeline, right? How do you pre-process, information extract, ETL, right? Extract, transform, load that we are talking about, and then make it presentable. So your data pipelines are going to be very, very important. Right from the point of ingestion to processing to finally presenting it into meaningful data, it will all focus on things that is more important to be managed and presented. Yeah. So what can you do? If you look at a use case of it, you start looking at your IT ops team, look at your current data that you have, which is metrics, events, logs, and traces. So you monitor your historical data. You look at engage, remember the engage part that you look at getting feedback, and then look at your root cause analysis and other stuff to do it. The engine is built at the bottom, right? Your data ingestion, your topology, your correlation, recognition, and remediation. And this is how it will start becoming useful for IT operations. If I want to make this useful for IT operations, we need to start thinking about, have we got these structures in place? Do we understand how the left hand talks to the right hand? What are some of the prerequisites? How are we going to do monitoring? How are we going to do engaging? How are we going to do automation? So only when you have this level of overall understanding will you be able to apply and get some results. So I want to exercise a word of caution. AIOps looks to be like the new shiny toy, but do not do that, because understand the prerequisites, the do's and don'ts. And if you have questions, do ask us, because we are not a training company. We're a consulting company doing training and coaching as part of making an impact. And we think that because we don't claim ourselves to be an expert, but over a period of time working with a lot of clients globally, we hope that we can give you some real-time use cases and scenarios to make it work. So the thought process is, use your historical data, real-time data, feed into observability, and then build a AIOps use case, and finally get something like self-healing, auto remediations, and provide them the business value, right? So all your historical data that comes from different sources has to feed into observability, your real user monitoring, your data traces, metrics, events, and all of those stuff put into AIOps engine, which is what you start to perceive as use cases, and then finally get into a results. So this is something that you need to start thinking about. We are moving from reactive to proactive to predictive, and finally as auto remediation, so that you can focus on more important things rather than just getting toiled with these aspects. So some of the use cases and challenges, and I wanted to give you a step-by-step process. A lot of people are asked, how do we do AIOps? So start a charter, build an AIOps team, look at your landscape of what the landscape will look like. What are your sources? Like what sources are you collecting? What are the methods to uh, process the data? Install if you have an AIOps engine that we need to do it. Configure the features, deploy for service management, automation, measure success, and celebrate, right? So it's a kind of a quick look at a 10-step model, which will help you to start thinking about how do we go about an AIOps journey. Typically, I see AIOps as a program or an initiative or an organizational department driving through that. This could be a possibility of how you can start looking at the stepwise approach, right? So a couple of slides and then we'll take some questions. A lot of people ask this question about how do I evaluate an AIOps tool? It could be X, Y, Z. We are vendor agnostic. As a consulting organization, we don't want to tell this tool is better and that this is up to you to do it. But when you're trying to start thinking about evaluating an AIOps tool or whatever the vendor promises, start asking this question. What's your core functionality? Are you looking at anomaly detection, root cause analysis, automated remediation? What is that needed? Because your core functionality is very important. Like if it's high, right? What is this high? The core functionality cannot be compromised. And that's why you need to be very clear about which use cases will help you the best reward by implementing your ops. Performance at scale, right? Is it that important? Ease of deployment or use. So you need to start having criteria. Typically, there is a center of excellence team in every organization that does the due diligence of looking at what tools to be adopted and how we need to make that work, right? So what are some of the use cases, right? I've given 3 scenarios. One is if you're IT service analytics, you look at operations manager, support teams and end users. You look at your SLAs, your change failure rate. One of the DORA metrics is change failure rate. So I want to look at how many of the changes have failed because it impacts user experience, right? And some of those things are wisdom of production. So I wanted to look at what are the high risk changes? What is correlating between the operation data and process data? Would it be meaningful that when I do a business impact analysis, the AI says that this is a risk, this is a high risk because we have not done this before, and the past experience says that we are not good in doing this. So it will give you a higher risk quotient so that you know that we need to do something about it, right? So that could be an IT service analytics part. From an application part, either it's administrators, architects, you look at your log insights, smart alerts, and then see what's your challenge that you want to focus. Are you focusing on cost optimization like FinOps, right? I want to look at how much is your utilization of my cloud capacity, right? Root cause identification, multiple analytics tools, because I use a lot of tools. Can I have a single source of truth? Because I don't get a unified view. And finally, if you are looking at digital experience, a lot of customers, a lot of leaders are looking at business insights because like we looked at markets like when we start off in India, then we started off in entity in Singapore, US, and realized when I went to Australia, we saw there was a huge opportunity in Australia because they were looking at a lot more towards DevOps, DevSecOps, SRE, and I thought that's a great market to do it. Now that business insight is also important because we need to grow the business, right? So at the end of the day, your leadership team doesn't care about whether you're solving an incident or problem. It's about how do I improve profitable growth, right? How do I improve my net promoter score? How do I improve my customer retention? That's the whole thought process that business is talking about. And we need to start appreciating that we need to have some level of focus on making this work, right? So the last 2 slides, and then we'll take Q&A, is if you started to look at AIOps and you're interested on, a lot of people ask, what next? And we have a workshop coming on 28th and 29th of September, which is a Saturday and Sunday, because we realize a lot of people have day job and you are taking time here to do it. It will be in APJ time zone, which is 11:30 Singapore time, 9 o'clock Indian time, where we go through this in a structured manner, right? With some basics and give you after 2 day go through an approach called AIOps Foundation course. So we talk a little bit about what is AIOps, what are the core technologies like machine learning, AI, what are some of the use cases, how do you implement, and we also are planning some practical demo. so that you know how AIOps works in real time, right? Because this is all great, but how do I see this incident getting resolved? How can we build in this auto remediation script? All of those stuff is being discussed in that particular workshop. So it's 28th and 29th of this month. I'm going to be personally delivering this workshop, and we will do a practical demo. And we also look at creating a reference guide. Some of the people here are already part of top cohort community. You will hear from us shortly, but you get an opportunity to be with like-minded professionals who are dealing day in and day out with some of the best practices and scenarios. And you should be able to sign up for such kind of an approach and then take it forward. So I'm happy to take questions. Now we have about 5 minutes to take questions, but please stay connected in terms of looking at things. And if you can also, Jaya, open up, and I'll just see if I can put a pause on the poll part of it and launch this. So please post your questions. If you are interested on TaUB AIOps Foundation course, you put that on the chat, on the polling questions. So we will take back and check it out to do it. We can send you the details, Anuradha. My team will be happy to send the details more. You can contact us as info@taubsolutions.com, or you can contact our sales rep head, Ishmit, who's also managing that part. So please do touch base with that. And we'll be more than happy to provide you more additional information, because I think, we have just started to have a glimpse of what it is, but we'll get more insights as we go through it. So please feel free to ask. So I'm opening up the floor for questions, and let's hear from people. Please go ahead and open up the floor for questions. Yeah.
Yeah, Sham here. Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Shyam.
Yeah, it's not a question, but one of the things that is happening in the recent past with many of the tooling platforms is, or some of the tooling platforms is the ability to ask questions in natural language. You
Right.
don't have to write a complex query. You just ask a question. Tell me the top most applications which are seeing the maximum errors.
Correct.
Tell me the top 10 users of this network. You do not have to really struggle with technical complexities. So the
Right.
user interface part is getting simplified so much,
Correct.
so that I have not experienced these tools, but I have heard about this right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to be fair, Shyam, the whole premise is that we want to make that without having, like for example, no code, low code as an example, right? Because a lot of these solutions have come into a place where we don't need to have an expertise to do certain things. We just leave it, and it should be easily. I think that's the world that we are doing it. I don't need to have programming languages. I don't need to learn large language models. I should be able to tell, and that system should be able to make it work. And this is going to get even more as we see this through, and getting this over. Absolutely spot on, and a good comment. Anuradha's question: as an MSP, which is managed service provider, from an application support perspective, we aim to introduce efficiency and productivity through automation, but we understand the potential for FTE reduction. This is a very sticky topic, Anuradha, right? Everybody, when you talk about full-time effort reduction, then people get to what, oh, right? So I think what is going to be important, let's be very clear, we are going to lose some people, right? And I'm going to be upfront honest about this. But I think we need to upskill ourselves, or socialize ourselves into a cross-skilling mode. Absolutely, right? Cross-skilling or upskilling mode. Because today what's happening is, if you do the same thing that you've been doing for the last 15 years, I don't think we are going to be getting a job tomorrow, right? So I think this whole aspect of moving from things that have been already done and dusted, we should give it to someone else, and then they should be able to take it on their own. What is important for us is start finding out what else should we learn. What are the opportunities that we can upskill ourselves? Because you will be having more opportunities. In fact, at one end, we will lose certain jobs, but AI is also going to create more jobs, right? But it's not going to be in the same fashion that we are doing IT application support or infrastructure support today. And that's where you need to keep a close watch on things of where is this whole journey pivoting, and what should we be doing to get into that zone. And that's where I think we will be able to help you, assist you, because a lot of our cohorts who have taken a one workshop with TaUB, they continue to take a lot of things because they get a lot more periodic updates of webinars, blog posts, and stuff like that. So we will be happy to get this one. But I think you're right. It is a challenge to talk with customers and part of it. But we'll have to talk a little bit offline because I would not be able to cover everything today. But happy to set up a call. As I said, I provide my LinkedIn email. Most of you are connected with me on LinkedIn. But if you have any questions, please do ask because this is a constant way of continuously looking at it. Specific AIOps tools you recommend, we provide some of those case studies and stories as part of the course content. So I would definitely encourage you to sign up for the 28-29 batch because we have reference case studies. We have also some of the tools in the market. We give a holistic understanding of the market presence. If you are specifically looking at Asia Pacific, we also have that report. So a lot of these reports are going to be given as part of the value addition during the course. So I hope you can sign up for some of these aspects. And as I said, we don't recommend XYZ tool because we want to be vendor agnostic, but the report will give you a lot more about their pros and cons. Like, for example, if you look at Gartner's Magic Quadrant, it gives you a lot more about what are the tools, what are their strengths and weaknesses, and if they are in challenger quadrant or in the top leader quadrant. So we'll be able to share some of those exercise on how we can make that more meaningfully done, right? So any other questions that I'm happy to take up as we go through this scenario? But it's hot. And I think a lot of clients that we are working with are asking, we need to get into this journey soon, right? But remember, you cannot get to the journey just like that. You need to start thinking about holistically what's your IT operations look like, how is your DevOps looking like, how is site reliability engineering looking like, how is your monitoring stack moving towards the aspect of observability and stuff like that. But there's a lot you can learn from that. I hope that you will take an opportunity to come back to us and get us in the journey, right? It's a journey for both business to consumers as business to business. But I have a very special corner for B2C. In fact, I did a post today about very grateful. We have trained about 10,000 people in the last 10 years as a company, and we want to impact more people, right? My goal is to impact 100,000 people before TaUB is done, right? But we have a lot more trainers, a lot of consultants who work with us to make it happen. So hopefully, over the period of time, we will achieve that goal. But this is exciting time. This is a great opportunity for you to invest your time and effort to make this work and take your journey forward. I tell people that you are the only people who are going to take care of your career, not your business, not your company, not your department. Because to be fair enough, I think I want to stop with that quote that love your job, but not your company, because you never know when your company will stop loving you. I mean, with all due respect, what is important is you have to take your career in your part. Don't wait for your budget to be approved from your company. A lot of people here have spent their own money to get through this whole journey. And trust me, that takes you forward in times of turbulence, right? The more you're prepared, the more you kind of doing well, then you cannot be replaced. The only way that you can reduce redundancy is to become more skilled or scalable resource that cannot be found anywhere else. So that's what I would leave you with that thought. I thank you everyone for your valuable time today. We will continue the conversations. I look forward to staying connected with that. So if you have shown your response of that done, we would more than happy to, and I'll share that aspect of people sharing this thing. So I will end the poll. About 7 of the people have shown interest on doing the AIOps Foundation course. We thank you. And maybe, so anybody who's got that questions, please do reach out to us and we'd be more than happy to have a conversation. I look forward to seeing some of you at our 28-29 event in Bangalore. I mean, obviously, we're getting people from other different regions as well. So it'd be a great collective learning to do that. And thanks, Alberto, for staying early in the morning. It's 4 o'clock in Philadelphia, in where he's staying there. But really appreciate your time and then seeing this through. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. We appreciate your time and effort. And we look forward to seeing you all being successful, right? In whatever way we can support to do that. Please stay in touch and let's make it magical. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone.
Quick question, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead,
Raise my
Anuradha.
hand.
If you have a question, please go
So
ahead.
we spoke about certain tools like MoveSoft, and there
Right.
is Splunk. We have Big Panda. I just
Correct.
wanted to understand if you have an successful implementation on ServiceNow using ServiceNow AI platform or ServiceNow Pro.
We have one scenario, Anuradha, where I can share that. I will have a look at it. If it's available and shareable, I will share that. Now, the part is also the use case, Anuradha, right?
Typically,
Now,
what happens is, our customers have reluctance in going in for a third-party tool.
correct,
A lot
correct.
of them have already invested in a giant in a giant like ServiceNow, and they want to understand, how that can be leveraged. And there are obvious other reasons. There are so many other redundancies in the ecosystem. So if you have a
Yeah,
successful implementation on ServiceNow, I'll be happy to connect on that separately, because
yeah.
we have some live requirements, which if we can get that consulting opportunity done through your
No,
organization.
I think definitely. I think it's a great case. In fact, we are working on a couple of pilots already for a client. Again, because we are bound by non-disclosure agreements, we cannot do that. But I will say some use cases. So give me some time because I'm going to be heading to Vietnam this week. But when I'm back, we can kind of connect. And you have my email and LinkedIn, so we'll be able to connect further and then see it forward.
Sure.
Absolutely,
Thank you.
definitely a common use case, Anu, for a lot of clients. They are leveraging AI ops in ServiceNow itself, as you rightly said. ServiceNow is beyond everything, right? They are covering everything,
Yeah.
but the implementation has got some challenges, which I will talk about.
Yes, there are challenges, which is why I'm looking forward to a successful implementation. That's where
Yeah,
I'm
so
standing. So it's not easy. Projects have
correct.
started and failed or not seen light of the day.
Correct, correct,
Right.
correct. So I will talk about some practical things of challenges that we need to keep in mind. Hopefully, we'll get better over a period of time, but happy to
Sure.
chat. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah. Any other questions?
Just a quick one. How
Yeah.
can we do this, the session on 28th? Are we sending emails to
Yeah. So I think I've made this one. I'll just put this one. If you can send an email on taubsolutions.com, info@taubsolutions.com, that's a good place for us to send you all the information because it depends on what region you are and all of those details. My team would get in touch with you by Monday to provide you this information. So if you can just send a note or drop a note on if you are interested on this one. So we would be more than happy to send you that information around and get you enrolled for that. Yeah. So we look forward to seeing you at our next session on things, and we'll be more than happy if you have any other questions, comments to things. So we thank everyone. Any other final questions before we do? I know that people are enthusiastic staying back there. That's very heartening for us. We are so grateful for being here, and we appreciate your time. We hope that we can do. Alberto, you have attended a lot of other sessions with TaUB. Can you just give a little bit of insight for people about TaUB training? I know that I'm putting on a spot on a early morning, but for people to understand the value of the training and value of TaUB solutions, you've been a great ambassador of us for over 2 to 3 years now. So some insights will help as well.
Okay. Good morning. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, it's early morning in Los Angeles, so I'm attending a conference here. So it's been a great journey with TaUB. Delivering fantastic. With TaUB in Africa, we've done a lot from SRE to AIOps to observability to DevSecOps, in fact, practically the digital transformation journey. So training with TaUB is something that you can never regret. Also BRM, because everything comes together with that BRM thing and ITO. So happy TaUB. So you're like a complete IT professional for the 21st century digital transformation journey. So I recommend TaUB anyway. Even here in the US, I'm still talking about TaUB. You guys on meeting. So
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alberto, for staying up early morning in West Coast about it. I hope you had a lot of fun in the session. It's been a great honor to be a part of the host for the session. I look forward to continuing the conversation. Stay connected. Even if you're signing up, not signing up, doesn't matter. Please stay connected. I've provided my LinkedIn and Alberto has given. It's a good part of networking. We all learn and share from each other. And have a great weekend. And thanks again for everyone. I hope to keep in touch and all the best for your journey on AIOps. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.